I never thought I'd fall apart for the man I swore I'd hate forever. But there I was, pressed face first against the cold glass wall of his penthouse, my breath fogging the surface with every gasp that broke past my lips. His hands gripped my hips like he owned them, like he owned every inch of me, body and soul. I tried to fight it. God, I tried. But when he leaned down, his mouth brushing my ear, his voice burned through me like wildfire. Say it, Elise. Tell me who you belong to. And I did. Because in that moment, there was nothing left of me that wasn't already his. If you're ready for more stories that keep you hooked from start to finish, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. See you in the next one. If I were to die today, my death certificate might as well read, "Sold for debt." That was the only thing circling in my head when the chapel doors creaked shut behind me. I didn't remember walking down the aisle. Didn't remember standing on this cold marble floor, my hands shaking inside delicate satin gloves. All I knew was that the air smelled like candle wax and wilting roses, like something pretty that had long since died. No applause, no smiles, no warmth, only rows of faces frozen and unreadable, as if they all knew exactly what I was. A payment, not a bride. And Lucian Blackwood stood there, waiting. Or rather, not waiting at all. He didn't reach for me. He didn't offer his arm. He didn't even meet my eyes. The city called him ruthless. They didn't know the half of it. They said I was lucky. That marrying Boston's most untouchable billionaire was a privilege girls like me could only dream of. I wondered if those people ever felt their lungs closing up in a dress 2 sizes too tight. If they ever stood in front of a man who could crush them with a single word, and knew it. If they ever felt like property, like I did now. I swallowed hard, trying not to sway under the weight of the silence pressing on my shoulders. Do you, Lucian Blackwood, take Elise Monroe to be your lawfully wedded wife? The priest's voice echoed through the high ceiling. A pause. A silence so long I felt it pierce straight through my chest. Lucian's jaw tightened, his lips barely moving. I do. And just like that, it was done. No one clapped. No one cared. Later that night, I found myself sitting on the edge of a bed that felt more like a stranger's throne than a place to sleep. The Blackwood estate was silent, too big, too empty. I kicked off my heels, curling my toes into the cold, hardwood floor. My wedding dress pooled around me like spilled milk. White, flawless, and meaningless. He hadn't come to the room. I didn't know if I was relieved or humiliated. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the ache in my chest, and just like always, my mind went back to her, my mother. I could still hear her humming in our tiny kitchen back in Maine. The scent of cinnamon bread in the oven, the way her hands brushed my hair as she whispered promises that nothing and no one could ever take our dignity away. She lied. Or maybe she'd been wrong all along, desperate to feel something, anything. I slid open the drawer in the nightstand, searching for, I didn't even know what. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of yellowed paper, tucked beneath a lace handkerchief. I pulled it out with trembling hands, recognizing her handwriting the moment my eyes landed on the first line. My sweet Elise, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you these words myself, and I am so sorry for that. There is something I never told you, something your father never wanted you to know. We owe the Blackwood family a debt. Not money, but honor. A promise I made long ago. One your father couldn't bear to face. I hope one day you'll understand, and I hope you'll forgive me. With all my love, Mom. The paper trembled in my hands as I read it again. And again. And again. What debt? What promise? My father had always said they, the Blackwoods, had destroyed us, that they were the reason our family had lost everything, that this marriage was his way of forcing Lucian to make things right. But this letter said otherwise. My throat tightened. Had I been a pawn all along? I stood up, clutching the paper, to my chest, and walked to the door. Slowly, I turned the handle and peeked into the dimly lit hallway. And there he was, Lucian, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor like the world bored him. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did. Maybe he heard me crying behind that door and chose not to care. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask why he looked like a man carrying a weight even heavier than mine. But I didn't. I stayed silent. I watched as he pushed off the wall, straightened his shoulders, and walked away, never once looking back. I closed the door quietly behind me, my back pressing against the wood as I slid to the floor, tears burning in my eyes. This wasn't a marriage. It was a transaction. And I had just become the final payment in a game I didn't understand. But I would. I swore to myself, gripping that letter like it was the only real thing left in the world. I would find out the truth, even if it destroyed me. Morning came, too quickly. I opened my eyes to find the same heavy silence pressing down on me. No sunlight peeked through the tall windows, only gray shadows stretching across the floor like long, tired arms. The letter lay on the nightstand where I'd left it. I hadn't slept much, not that it mattered. I had nowhere else to be. No one, waiting for me. I was already exactly where they wanted me to be. I dressed myself slowly, choosing a simple gray sweater and black slacks, the kind of thing that wouldn't draw attention. I didn't want to look like a bride. I didn't want to look like anything at all. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. Of course it was. I made my way downstairs, expecting to find at least one curious face, one maid or staff member staring at me like I was some misplaced ornament. But the house was dead silent, until I heard it, the faintest clink of a spoon against porcelain. I followed the sound to the kitchen, which felt strange in a house this large. It looked untouched, like no one had cooked here in years. The air smelled of polished wood and distant memories. And there he was, Lucian, sitting at the far end of the kitchen island, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal the edge of a tattoo on his forearm. He didn't look at me. I stood frozen in the doorway, unsure whether to step inside or turn back. "You're early," he said flatly, eyes still on his coffee. I swallowed hard, clutching the hem of my sweater. I didn't sleep much. Silence stretched between us again, suffocating and sharp. I took a step closer, forcing my voice not to crack. "Where is everyone?" Lucian finally looked up, and the weight of his stare nearly knocked the breath out of me. "Gone," he said simply. "I told them to leave for the week." My chest tightened. "Why?" He leaned back slightly, tilting his head as if weighing whether I was worth an explanation. "Because," he said coldly, "I didn't want witnesses if you tried to run again." My face burned with humiliation. I had tried to run once, days before the wedding. I'd packed a small bag and made it as far as the train station before his driver intercepted me. I'd never even made it onto the platform. I crossed my arms, clinging to the small ember of courage still flickering in my chest. "I have a right to see my father," I whispered. Lucian's jaw clenched. "He's recovering. You'll stay here." You can't keep me locked up like this." His chair scraped against the floor as he stood, towering over me in a way that made every part of me want to shrink. But I didn't move. "You're here because of him," he snapped, "because of what he owes me. You think you're a prisoner? You're barely collateral." Tears burned my throat, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. I turned on my heel and stormed back upstairs, locking the bedroom door behind me. My heart pounded in my ears as I pressed my back against the wood, trying to catch my breath. He was never going to let me leave. Later that afternoon, while pacing the room like a caged animal, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the far side of the fireplace mantel sat a small glass jewelry box. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was my mother's silver ring. I rushed over, my hands trembling as I lifted the lid. It was hers. I recognized the tiny engraved initials on the inside, E.M. for Elise Monroe. How had it ended up here? I slipped, the ring onto my finger, swallowing the lump in my throat. It was the only thing left of her I could hold. That night, after hours of silence and pacing and wondering what the hell I was doing here, I cracked. I pulled on a coat, grabbed my scarf, and crept down the back staircase. My heart raced with every step. I knew the risk. I didn't care. I had to see my father. The front door creaked softly as I eased it open. I slipped out onto the stone porch, the cold air biting my cheeks. My car wasn't here, but I remembered the old service road leading toward town. I didn't make it halfway down the path before headlights blinded me. Lucian's car. He got out slowly, shutting the door with a quiet finality that made my stomach twist. I backed up, but he didn't come closer. "You think I'm the villain in this story?" he said, voice low and sharp like broken glass. I swallowed, clutching my coat tighter. "Am I wrong?" His expression didn't change. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, holding it out to me like it weighed 100 pounds. I stared at it, confused. "Your father's medical bills," Lucian said quietly. "Paid, in full, 2 weeks ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Why?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just got back in his car and drove away, leaving me standing there, alone in the cold, clutching the proof that maybe, just maybe, this man wasn't who I thought he was. I didn't sleep that night either. The envelope burned in my hands, like it carried a curse I couldn't shake. Paid in full. Lucian had paid everything, quietly, without forcing me to know or thank him. But why? What game was this? I sat on the floor by the window, knees pulled to my chest, staring out at the fog rolling over the Blackwood estate grounds. I felt more trapped than ever, but this time, it wasn't the walls that kept me here. It was the questions. By morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. I dressed quickly, tucking the letter from my mother and the envelope of receipts into my coat pocket. I had to hear the truth from the one person who started all of this, my father. I didn't wait for permission. Didn't wait for Lucian. I slipped out through the service gate while the house was still quiet, hailing the first cab I could find. The drive to the hospital felt endless. When I finally stepped into my father's room, I expected him to look frail, small, like a man broken by guilt. But no. He was sitting upright in bed, flipping through a sports magazine like nothing in the world had changed. When he saw me, he smiled like I was his little girl again. "Elise," he croaked. "Finally decided to come see your old man?" I stood frozen. In the doorway, fists clenched at my sides. He didn't know yet. Didn't know what I'd found. "I know what you did," I whispered. His smile faltered, eyes narrowing just slightly. "What are you talking about?" I took a slow step forward, pulling the crumpled letter from my pocket. I found her letter. Mom's letter. She said we owed the Umaya Blackwoods. That you owed them, not the other way around. His face drained of color. Elise, listen. No, I snapped, voice cracking. You told me they ruined us. You told me he forced this marriage on me. But you lied. You used me. My father sank back against the pillows, running a shaking hand over his face. You don't understand. Then make me understand, I choked out. He closed his eyes for a long moment before speaking, and when he did, his voice was nothing but a tired whisper. I borrowed money from Samuel Blackwood, Lucian's father, 20 years ago, to save the factory, to save this family. But I couldn't pay it back. I swallowed hard, my chest aching. And you promised me to him, I whispered. He winced like I'd slapped him. I thought the debt would die with Samuel. But when Lucian took over, he came to collect. I felt sick, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. You could have told me, I whispered. You could have let me choose. He looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time in years. You think I wanted this for you? He snapped, voice breaking. I did what I had to do to keep us alive. No, Dad, I whispered. You did what you had to do to keep your pride alive. I turned and walked out before he could say another word. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. I just walked, through the hospital, through the parking lot, down streets I barely recognized. My breath came in short, ragged bursts, like the air itself was fighting me, and then I felt it, a presence behind me. I turned, heart slamming into my ribs. Lucian. He stood a few steps away, hands in his coat pockets, watching me like he'd been there all along. How long have you been following me? I whispered. Long enough, he said softly. I hated how steady his voice was, how much I wanted to crumble the moment I heard it. You knew, I accused. You knew he lied to me. Lucian's jaw tightened. I did. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't care anymore. I didn't care who saw. Why didn't you tell me? He took a step closer, slow and cautious, like I was a wild animal ready to bolt. Because I didn't want to watch you hate him the way I watched my mother hate my father, he whispered. I staggered back a step, stunned. He kept talking, voice lower now, almost fragile. My mother was promised to my father for the same reason. A debt. She spent her whole life resenting him, resenting me. I wasn't going to do that to you. I pressed a hand to my mouth, shaking. Then why marry me at all? He laughed softly, a bitter, broken sound. Because your father made sure there was no other way. You were the final payment, Elise. But He trailed off, exhaling hard. I never wanted you to feel like you didn't have a choice. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the way his voice cracked. Maybe it was the way my heart shattered all over again. Or maybe I just didn't want to feel alone anymore. I took a shaky step forward. Lucian's eyes widened just slightly as I closed the distance between us. And before I could think twice, I pressed my forehead against his chest. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then slowly, carefully, his arms came around me, and I let him hold me. Not because I forgave him, not because I understood, but because, for the first time since I walked into this mess, I didn't want to carry it alone. We stood on that sidewalk for what felt like hours. I didn't move. He didn't speak. I pressed my cheek against the fabric of his coat, the steady sound of his breathing filling the space where all my anger had lived just moments ago. I wasn't ready to forgive him. But maybe I was tired of fighting alone. When I finally pulled back, Lucian didn't let me go. "Come home," he whispered. Home. I almost laughed at the word, but something in his voice, low, unguarded, made me nod. For the first time, I followed him back willingly. We didn't speak on the drive. I kept my hands clasped tight in my lap, staring out the window at the blur of streetlights and passing buildings. When we reached the Blackwood estate, I expected him to lead me upstairs, to leave me behind like he always did, but instead, he led me to the kitchen. I watched as he moved quietly, rolling up his sleeves, filling the kettle with water. He stood in the same spot my mother once did, her laughter still haunting my memories. And when he placed a delicate porcelain cup of tea in front of me, I couldn't hold back the ache in my chest. "You made this yourself?" I whispered, blinking at him. Lucian leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "I watched you make it once. After your mother's funeral." I flinched like he'd struck me. "You remember that?" He nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to talk to you back then. You looked so lost." He exhaled sharply. "I guess I've always watched from a distance. It's what I'm best at." I swallowed the lump in my throat and wrapped my hands around the warm cup. We sat in silence for a while, not looking at each other, but not needing to fill the space with empty words either. Hours passed. At some point, Lucian stood and disappeared, down the hall, leaving me alone at the table. I thought about following him. I thought about going back upstairs and pretending none of this had happened. But something stopped me. I remembered the letter and the ring. I slipped the silver band onto my finger again, staring at the tiny engraved letters inside. EM, my mother's initials, or mine, now that I thought about it. For the first time, the weight of it didn't feel so heavy. When Lucian returned, he wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize walked beside him, tall, sharp-eyed, carrying an air of quiet authority. His features were softer than Lucian's, but the resemblance was there. Lucian cleared his throat. "This is Charles," he said. "My uncle." The man gave me a small nod. "Elise, it's good to finally meet you." I stood, unsure what to say. "I asked him here because there's something you deserve to know," Lucian continued, glancing at Charles. His uncle sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Your father isn't the only one who gambled with loyalty," Charles said softly. "Lucian, he's been protecting you in ways you don't even realize." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Lucian shifted uncomfortably, jaw clenching. I stepped down from my position as Blackwood heir," he admitted quietly. My heart stopped. "You... what?" He nodded, eyes never leaving mine. "The board didn't want you. They didn't want your father's name tied to this family. They threatened to cut me out if I didn't end it." I felt like the ground was tilting beneath me. "You gave it all up. For me?" Lucian swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for your father, or for the debt. I did it because I couldn't let them turn you into a bargaining chip all over again." I pressed my trembling hands to my mouth, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Charles stepped forward, placing a hand on Lucian's shoulder. "Your husband has lost more than you know," he said gently. But he did it without hesitation. I didn't know what to say. The man I thought had trapped me had freed me, had freed us both. When Charles left, Lucian didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking like he expected me to hate him all over again. But I didn't. I crossed the room slowly, standing in front of him, and for the first time, I reached up and cupped his face with both hands. He flinched, just slightly. "I don't know how to forgive you," I whispered, "but I want to try." His eyes closed like the weight of the world had just lifted. That night, we didn't touch. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We lay side by side in the same bed for the first time, breathing in the same quiet air, as if somehow, without meaning to. We had finally started to understand what it meant to share the same space without walls. And for the first time since I walked into this house, I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt like maybe I was home. We didn't talk much the next morning. Lucian had meetings downtown, or so he said. He kissed the top of my head before he left. Not on my lips, not like a husband might, but soft enough to make me forget how to breathe for just a moment. And then I was alone again. Except, it didn't feel the same as before. The house wasn't as cold today. Or maybe I was different now. I walked the halls slowly, tracing my fingers along the polished banisters, breathing in the faint scent of cedar and lemon oil. I ended up in the library, the same place I used to dream about when I was a little girl. The idea of being surrounded by books, stories, possibilities. But all I could think about was him, and how, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the man I married. That night, I cooked dinner. It felt ridiculous, standing in that enormous kitchen with its industrial appliances and endless marble counters. I wasn't even sure if half of it worked. But I made something simple. Garlic pasta with rosemary chicken. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fancy. But it smelled like home. I didn't set a grand table. I just waited in the kitchen, praying that he would come home before the food went cold. I heard the front door click open just as I was about to give up. Lucian appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, loosening his tie, looking every bit like the man I used to fear. But when his eyes landed on me, something in his face softened. "You cooked?" he asked, almost like he didn't believe it. I nodded, twisting my fingers together nervously. "I didn't know if you'd eat it." He walked toward me, slowly, like every step was measured. And when he stopped in front of me, his voice dropped to a whisper. "I'd eat anything if you made it." We ate at the island, sitting close but not quite touching. We didn't fill the space with small talk. We didn't need to. When we finished, I stood to clean up, but Lucian gently took the plate from my hands. "Let me," he murmured. I watched, him wash every dish carefully, sleeves rolled up, forearms flexing with every movement. It felt wrong to stare, but I couldn't stop. I wondered if this was what it could have been like all along. Later, when the house had gone quiet again, I stood at the foot of the staircase, staring up toward the bedroom. I didn't know what came over me, but I climbed those stairs anyway. He was already in bed when I walked in, wearing nothing but a plain black t-shirt and loose sweatpants. He looked so ordinary, so human. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. Lucian sat up slowly, resting his forearms on his knees. "Elise?" I swallowed hard. "I don't want to sleep alone tonight," I whispered. His breath hitched, just barely. But he nodded. He held the sheets open for me and I slid in, fully clothed, lying stiff as a board beside him. The silence was unbearable, so I turned toward him. And to my surprise, he was already watching me. My throat tightened. "I keep waiting for this to feel wrong," I whispered. "But it doesn't." Lucian's jaw flexed like he was fighting some invisible war. "Elise," his voice cracked. I placed my hand gently on his chest, feeling his heartbeat thundering beneath my palm. "Do you want this?" I asked softly. He shuddered under my touch, gripping the edge of the sheets like his life depended on it. "I've wanted you. Every second I've known you," he rasped. "But I need you to be sure." I leaned in, brushing my lips against his jaw, feeling his breath catch. "I'm sure." The air between us changed in an instant. Lucian cupped my face with both hands, pulling me in slowly, reverently, like I was something sacred. His lips met mine, not with force, not with desperation, but with a kind of aching tenderness that made my whole body tremble. He kissed me like he had all the time in the world. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "Take it off," I whispered, tugging at his shirt. He hesitated for just a second before obeying, pulling the fabric over his head and tossing it aside. I ran my fingers down his bare chest, marveling at the way his skin shivered beneath my touch. Lucian slid his hands under the hem of my sweater, pausing to look me in the eyes. "Still sure?" he whispered. I nodded. He undressed me slowly, carefully, like he was memorizing every inch of me. And when he finally lowered me onto the pillows, his hands never stopped moving, tracing every curve, every breath, every heartbeat. He kissed me, again, deeper this time, his body pressing into mine like he couldn't bear to leave any space between us. We fit together like two halves of something broken finally made whole. There was no rush, no demands, only quiet gasps, whispered names, and the soft creak of the mattress beneath us. Afterward, he held me close, burying his face in my hair like he never wanted to let go. "I've never deserved you," he whispered against my skin. I closed my eyes, clutching him tighter. "But you have me." I breathed, and for the first time since the day I became his wife, I wanted to be. The morning after felt different. Not louder, not busier, but different. The silence wasn't as heavy anymore. It felt full, like the house had finally taken its first real breath in years. Lucian had left a note on the nightstand when I woke up. "Didn't want to wake you. I'll be home for dinner." Eli held the slip of paper to my chest, smiling like a fool. I should have known peace doesn't last in a house built on secrets. It started with a knock on the front door. When I opened it, Charles was standing there, his expression tight, eyes darting over my shoulder like he was preparing for a fight. "Elise," he breathed. "Is Lucian home?" I shook my head. "He left early this morning." "Why?" Charles stepped inside, closing the door softly but firmly. "We have a problem." He handed me a manila folder. I opened it slowly, my heart sinking as I scanned the documents inside. It was a report, a scandal in the making. My father's name splashed across the pages, tied to every bad decision, every broken deal, every debt he ever owed, and worse, it linked him to Lucian. To me. "They're planning to release this," Charles whispered. "Tomorrow, on the anniversary of Samuel Blackwood's death." I swallowed hard, clutching the papers like they could burn me if I let go. "Who's behind it?" Charles hesitated. "My brother, Gerald, Lucian's uncle. The same man who had once fought to cut Lucian out of the family. The same man who had everything to gain if Lucian fell." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "If this goes public, Lucian's done," I whispered. Charles nodded grimly. "They'll paint him as the fool who married a debt-ridden factory girl too. Save face. He'll lose everything." I pressed a shaking hand to my lips, pacing the floor. "I have to leave." Charles's head snapped up. "What?" I turned to him, heart pounding. "If I leave now? If I file for annulment?" "They can't tie this to him," They'll have nothing. Charles grabbed my arm, his grip firm. Elise, if you walk away now, you'll give Gerald exactly what he wants. Lucian won't let you. He won't have a choice, I choked out. I didn't wait for Charles to stop me. I ran upstairs, grabbed my coat, and packed a small bag with the barest essentials. My hands shook so hard I could barely zip it closed. I left Lucian's note on the bed, untouched. I was halfway down the stairs when the front door slammed open. Lucian. His eyes went straight to my bag. His face fell, like the air had been punched from his lungs. "What are you doing?" he rasped. I froze. I have to go." He crossed the room in 2 strides, standing in front of me, his chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. "You're running again," he whispered. "After everything—" I pressed a hand to his chest, stopping him. "No, I'm protecting you." I shoved the folder into his hands, tears blurring my vision. "They're going to destroy you, Lucian. And it's my fault, my family's fault. I won't let you burn for this." His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. When he looked up, something raw flickered in his eyes. "You think I care?" he snapped. "You think I'd rather lose you than a name I never wanted?" I shook my head, choking on a sob. "They'll tear you apart. Let them," he breathed. He dropped the folder and sank to his knees in front of me, gripping my waist like I was the only thing holding him together. His voice cracked when he spoke again. "I don't care about the Blackwood name. I don't care about the board, or the legacy, or the money." His hand slid up to cup my face, forcing me to look into eyes that were no longer cold. "I care about you." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I'm not worth it. You're worth everything." He pulled me down to my knees with him, wrapping me in his arms like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. And for the first time, I let myself believe him. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, kneeling on the floor, clutching each other in a house that had seen too many ghosts. When we finally stood, Lucian cupped my face again, his forehead resting against mine. "Whatever comes next," he whispered, "we face it together." And this time, I didn't argue. The plan had been to leave, but I stayed, because when he said together, I believed him this time. The days that followed blurred into something strangely peaceful. No calls from Charles, no threats from Gerald, no breaking headlines. It was the quiet before the storm. And somehow, I didn't mind waiting for it. One evening, after dinner, Lucian found me sitting on the back steps of the estate, staring out over the fog-covered gardens. He stood there for a moment, watching me with that unreadable expression I'd started to understand better. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Let me take you somewhere tomorrow." I looked up, blinking. "Where?" He smiled, just a little. "Home." The drive felt like breathing again for the first time. Lucian didn't tell me where we were going, but my heart knew the moment we passed the welcome sign for Hollow Hill Cemetery. I hadn't been back since her funeral. I swallowed hard, clutching Lucian's hand in my lap as he parked beneath an old oak tree. He didn't rush me. He didn't speak. He just waited while I gathered the courage to open the door. The path to her grave felt shorter than I remembered. I knelt in front of the simple headstone, tracing my fingers over her name. Margaret Monroe, beloved mother. Gone too soon. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but there was something peaceful about being here again. About having Lucian standing silently behind me, giving me space but not letting me feel alone. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small bundle of wildflowers I'd gathered earlier that morning. Lavender, rosemary, and white daisies. I laid them gently at the base of the stone. "I thought I knew everything, Mom," I whispered. I thought I understood what you gave up for me. My throat tightened. I was wrong. About you. About Dad. About him. I glanced over my shoulder, meeting Lucian's eyes. He nodded, silent but steady. I turned back to the stone. I forgive you, I whispered. For the secrets, for the silence, for all the things I couldn't understand when I was too young to ask. I reached up, pressing my palm flat against the cool stone. And I hope, wherever you are, you can forgive me too. When I stood, Lucian reached for my hand without hesitation, threading his fingers through mine. We stood there together, looking down at the flowers, until the sun started to dip low in the sky. On the drive back, I leaned my head against the window, closing my eyes as the miles slipped away. Lucian reached over, resting his hand on my thigh, his thumb brushing slow, steady circles for once. I didn't feel like I had to fill the silence. Later that night, while unpacking my bag, I found something I didn't remember bringing with me. A small velvet pouch. I opened it slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The silver ring. My mother's ring, the one I thought I'd left behind on the nightstand. I turned it over in my hands, heart pounding when I saw the tiny folded note tucked inside. You belong wherever you choose to stay, my love. Mom. I pressed the ring to my lips, tears stinging. My eyes, somehow, she'd known. Even back then, she'd known I'd have to fight to feel like I belonged to something again. Lucian found me sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching the ring like it was my lifeline. He didn't ask questions. He just sat beside me, pulling me gently into his lap. We stayed like that for a long time, me wrapped in his arms, the ring pressed between our palms. I need to go see my father, I whispered finally. Lucian tensed beneath me. Elise. I have to, I breathed. Not for him. For me. He nodded after a long pause. Then I'll drive you. My father didn't look surprised when we showed up at the hospital the next day. He didn't smile, didn't offer empty words. He just sat there, staring at the floor like the weight of the world had finally settled on his shoulders. I stepped inside alone, closing the door behind me. Lucian waited in the hallway. I took a deep breath and sat down across from the man who had broken more than just promises, Dad. He didn't look up. I'm not here to argue, I whispered. His shoulders sagged, but he said nothing. I swallowed hard. I'm here to say goodbye. He flinched. I'm not leaving you to carry this anymore, I continued. And I'm not letting your mistakes ruin what's left of my life. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. I forgive you, Dad, but I'm done paying your debts. His throat worked like he was trying to speak, but no words came out. For once, that was enough. I stood, pressing my hand to his shoulder one last time. And then I walked out, leaving the past behind me. Lucian pulled me into his arms the moment I stepped into the hallway. I sank into him, breathing in the quiet strength I'd found where I least expected it. I'm proud of you, he whispered against my hair, and for the first time, I felt it too. A week later, we stood in front of the same chapel where I had first married him. No crowds, no photographers, no board members or family members breathing down our necks. Just us, and Charles, standing a few steps away with a quiet, knowing smile. Lucian held both my hands in his thumbs brushing over my knuckles like he couldn't bear to let me go, not even for a second. You sure you want to do this again? He whispered, his voice low and steady. I nodded, tears already pricking my eyes. This time I'm walking toward you. Not away. We didn't hire a priest. We didn't exchange official vows. Instead, Lucian took a small black box from his jacket pocket and opened it to reveal a simple silver band, polished but imperfect. Not flashy. Not cold like the first one. Just real. I bought this the day after. You moved into the estate, he whispered. I've been carrying it ever since. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my heart swelling so full I thought it might burst. He slid the ring onto my finger, my mother's ring on one hand, his on the other. Then I reached into my coat and pulled out a matching band I had hidden there, the initials LB engraved on the inside. Lucian's breath hitched as I took his hand and slid the ring onto his finger. No more debts, I whispered. No more boardrooms or family battles. Just us. He cupped my face, leaning his forehead against mine. Just us, he breathed. We didn't need applause. We didn't need witnesses. We had already survived the worst. And somehow, we had found our way back to each other. That night, we didn't return to the Blackwood estate. We drove hours north, toward the edge of Maine, to the little cabin my mother had once dreamed of retiring in. It had stood empty for years, left to gather dust and silence. But when Lucian unlocked the door and stepped aside to let me in, it felt like we were finally breathing again. I lit the old stone fireplace while Lucian unpacked 2 bags in the corner. No tuxedos. No gowns, just sweatpants, wool socks, and oversized sweaters. We brewed coffee in the tiny kitchen, the scent filling the space like a promise of something simple, something ours. Lucian set 2 mugs on the table and pulled me into his arms, swaying, to music that didn't exist, his chin resting on top of my head. I used to imagine what our life would have been like if we had met any other way, I whispered. He smiled against my hair, and I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I think we wouldn't have lasted. His brows lifted in surprise. Why? He asked softly. Because I needed to lose everything to understand what really mattered, I whispered. And I think so did you. He leaned down, pressing his lips softly to mine. Then let's not waste another second. That night, tangled in the old quilt my mother once sewed, we loved each other like it was the first time all over again. No hesitation. No doubt. Just steady hands, soft whispers, and the quiet certainty that we had finally stopped running. Afterward, we lay tangled together, our legs woven under the blankets, the steady rhythm of his breathing lulling me into something I had never known before. Peace. Lucian traced his fingers along the silver ring on my hand, his voice barely above a whisper. You know what I realized? He murmured. What? His lips curved into a soft smile. I never really owned you. I turned my head to face him, brushing my fingertips over his jaw. And I never really belonged to anyone but myself, I whispered. He nodded, pulling me closer. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn you anyway. We stayed, like that until the sun began to rise, painting the cabin in soft gold light. Lucian pressed his lips to my temple and whispered the words I never thought I'd hear from him. Not as a deal, not as a payment, but as a promise. You're not mine because of a contract. You're mine because you chose to be, and I'll never stop choosing you. Every day, for the rest of my life. And just like that, I knew I was finally home. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this story. If you enjoyed this journey and want to experience more heartwarming, emotional stories just like this one, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these stories alive. See you in the next one.